Now the Supreme Court's going to hear a challenge to President Trump's tariff policy. And Eamon Javers, you can also look at this on Polymarket. Joins us now with more on the case. I think only 35% chance of the president prevailing with this tariff case. I don't know whether that's accurate or not. But money, yesterday we saw it, Eamon. There were people betting $2 million on Mamdani to make $100,000. No, it wasn't, though. Was it?
Really? It's not if it's a sure thing, but that is
a sure thing.
That's a huge risk to take for a relatively small payoff.
That shows why, Eamon, instead of polls, if you plunk down a couple $1 million, you probably have a pretty good idea what's gonna happen. Yeah. Now I'm thinking I believe
I saw, Joe, yesterday?
Yeah.
I saw people online, somebody tweeted this at me, people online are betting during the White House press briefing on the next word that Caroline Leavitt will say. And one guy had bet $700 that the next word was going to be China, and I asked her a question about China, and he was like celebrating online and tweeting it out and screaming. He was live streaming himself betting.
You asked her
No,
a question.
I didn't, but this opens up a whole new revenue stream for me, right?
Oh man! Don't even joke about that. I mean, there was an earnings call the other night where they had
in the briefing room.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of ridiculous the things you can place money on at this point. Forget about free throws in the NBA. Trying to get a CEO to say something in an earnings call. I forget which CEO said something maybe it was Coinbase. Somebody said something the other day and ticked off the last answer that he gave was every single word that there was a bet on him whether or not he would say it on the earnings call. Just used a sentence and used every one of those things. It's insane.
I personally,
and we have reached crazy places.
Yeah, I personally think people need a new hobby. But let's talk about the Supreme Court, which is why I'm here this morning. So look, it is going to be an enormously high-stakes day at the Supreme Court today, as you guys were just saying. President Trump says he's not going to attend today's oral arguments after all, but Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is expected to be seated in the front row today. And President Trump says he believes this is going to be one of the most important decisions ever made by the Supreme Court. Now, a very large part of the tariffs that the president has enacted this year are on the line in this decision. The Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court, where, remember, Trump has appointed 3 of 9 members, to reverse a ruling from a lower court that found that most of the tariffs are an illegal use of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. Trump has used that law to impose what he called his fentanyl tariffs, his Liberation Day tariffs earlier this year. An estimated $90 billion in tariff revenue hangs on the high court's ruling here. Treasury has said it most likely would have to send that money back this year if the Trump administration is to lose this case. Now remember, the Constitution gives the power to impose tariffs and taxes to Congress. No president before Trump has used this 1977 law to put tariffs in place, but the law does allow a president to, quote, regulate imports of property owned by a foreign country or foreign national. Now, the White House says that's enough to allow these tariffs, but the businesses that are suing the administration argue that the power to regulate is not the same as the power to tax, and therefore the tariffs should be struck down. We'll see what the court has to say about all this at about 10 a.m. this morning. And by the way, guys, the companies that are suing the administration here, not the big global conglomerates that you might expect. The 2 initial cases were brought by smaller firms, including 2 toy manufacturers, a New York wine importer, and a woman's apparel company. Back over to you guys.
Yeah, Eamon, that's because the big companies can go to the White House and try and negotiate and, lobby for themselves. The small companies are the ones that have no recourse.
Yeah, I think you're seeing a decision by big companies that confronting this administration is not a good use of their resources, right? I mean, they may object to these tariffs. It might be eating into their bottom line. You just heard the Cava CEO tell you guys they're eating some of the tariff costs themselves. But adopting a confrontational posture with Donald Trump is not really good for their business because they can be singled out and targeted. These smaller businesses, though, it is existential for them, and they're less likely to be targeted by the president. The president is less likely to go after, a woman's cycling apparel company or an educational toy company or something like that that's super small, just because the optics of that are not great. So I think it's a tactical decision by the big companies to stay out of this, but I can tell you a lot of them are quietly rooting it along.
Is there any way it's a split decision? I mean, because I was thinking yesterday, in fact, I asked the Treasury Secretary, you know, the emergency uses for, I don't know, trade deficit, how did that suddenly get so bad it was an emergency? But the rare earth materials and metals, that seems to constitute what could be construed as an emergency. If someone hits you with that in your entire, you know, everything that we do, we need that stuff. Couldn't that be said? Oh, yeah, you're right there. That is an emergency. Yeah, not so much on maybe on the, you know, on the trade imbalance side of things. How would they rule?
Yeah. Well, I think the Treasury Secretary pointed this out to you guys yesterday, saying that he thinks that they do have alternatives. You know, they have some backup authorities that they could use here. But the trick is that those authorities are more cumbersome, was what he said yesterday. That's because they require a long investigation, a whole process. What Trump has been doing this year is pretty much unilaterally imposing these tariffs on essentially on a whim. He likes that power and that flexibility.
Could the Supreme Court ruling take into account that there are different, you know, that the tariffs against China because of the rare earth, that is an emergency and that can stand? Yeah. The other tariffs cannot stand. Could it be a split ruling that way? That's what I was asking. Not what the
It absolutely could be, and that's what the administration is arguing to get the court to decide with them across the board on these so-called IEEPA tariffs. What the administration is saying is, look, the president deserves a lot of deference here because this is national security, because this is foreign policy. Those things are the president's remit, not Congress necessarily. So we really need this authority because of the way the president's using it to engage in foreign policy.
Rare earths came along afterwards. The initial reason that they cited for the emergency was fentanyl.
Right. But, you know, you could use any emergency you want as long as the court buys that argument.